9-year-old boy runs away from home carrying his younger sister and enters the neighbor's house crying. When the neighbor discovers what's happening, he immediately calls the police. The cabinet door creaked as Thad opened it for the third time, hoping somehow he'd missed something. His thin fingers traced the back of the empty shelf, collecting only dust. At 9 years old, he wasn't tall enough to see inside without standing on his tiptoes, balancing precariously on the chipped laminate counter that had seen better days. "Thaddy," Ren's small voice came from behind him. "I'm hungry." He turned to face his 6-year-old sister, who stood in the kitchen doorway clutching her worn stuffed penguin. The evening light filtering through the grimy window cast long shadows across her unwashed hair. She hadn't complained when he couldn't get the hot water to work this morning. "I know, Ren. I'm looking." His voice carried a patience that no 9-year-old should have mastered. The kitchen clock read 6:43 p.m. its steady ticking a reminder of another day their mother hadn't come home. 3 days now, the longest stretch yet. The apartment had grown colder as the day progressed. Thad had found the notice about the heating being cut off, crumpled behind the couch where their mother must have tossed it. He didn't understand all the words, but the big red, final notice told him enough. He climbed down from the counter and opened the refrigerator, though he knew what he'd find: a half-empty bottle of ketchup, some expired milk, and a single wrinkled apple that had seen better days. The light inside flickered weakly, and Thad wondered how long before that bill would go unpaid too. "Maybe we can share the apple?" Ren suggested, her voice small but hopeful. She was always trying to help, even when there wasn't much help to give. Thad felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the one that came whenever she tried to make things easier for him. "No, you have it," he said, reaching for the fruit and wiping it on his sleeve before handing it to her. "I had those crackers from Mrs. Peterson at lunch. Remember?" It was a lie, but a necessary one. He'd given those crackers to Ren hours ago. As Ren sat at their small kitchen table, carefully eating her apple in tiny bites to make it last longer, Thad's mind wandered to their mother, Autumn. He remembered when she used to paint, her hands covered in bright colors, her laugh filling their old apartment before they had to move to this one. Before Nash. Before the needles he sometimes found in the bathroom. Before she started disappearing for days at a time with hollow promises of coming back with groceries and presents. The temperature dropped further as night fell. Thad had gathered all their blankets onto Ren's bed, creating a nest of sorts. Most of the blankets were thin, worn things, but there was one good one left, a thick, blue fleece blanket that Dr. Thorne from next door had given them last Christmas. Thad had kept it hidden from their mother, afraid it would disappear like so many other things did when she needed money. "Time for bed, Ren," he announced, watching her carefully wrap her apple core in a paper towel. She never left mess around. They'd both learned early that attracting roaches meant more problems than it was worth. "Can you tell me a story?" she asked as he helped her into her warmest pajamas, the ones with only one small hole in the knee. "The one about the penguin family?" Thad managed a smile, tucking her into the blanket nest. "Once there was a family of penguins who lived in the warmest part of Antarctica," he began, the familiar story flowing easily. He'd made it up months ago, on another cold night when the heat was out. They had special magic in their feathers that kept them warm no matter how cold it got. He continued the story until Ren's breathing grew steady and deep, but sleep eluded him. The apartment had grown so cold he could see his breath in the dim light from the street lamp outside. Ren shivered in her sleep, despite all the blankets. That's when he made his decision. Moving carefully to avoid waking her, Thad went to the closet where he'd hidden the blue blanket. It was still clean, unlike most things in their apartment. As he wrapped Ren in it, she stirred slightly but didn't wake. With gentle determination, he lifted her into his arms, surprised as always by how light she felt. The hallway outside their apartment was dim, one of the fluorescent lights flickering erratically. Dr. Thorne's apartment was only 4 doors down, but it felt like miles. Thad had seen her just yesterday, when she was coming home with her grocery bags. She'd smiled at them like she always did. Sometimes she gave them cookies, and she never asked questions when their mother wasn't around. Thad's heart pounded as he stood before her door, Ren's warm breath steady against his neck. The metal numbers, for F, stared back at him as he gathered his courage. They couldn't spend another night like this. He couldn't watch Ren shiver anymore. His knuckles rapped softly on the door, then harder when he realized how quiet the first knock had been. He heard movement inside, the soft padding of slippered feet approaching. As the lock clicked and the door began to open, Thad held his sister tighter, and for the first time in a long while, allowed himself to cry. Dr. River Thorne had seen many things in her 40 years as a child psychologist, but the sight before her doorway that winter evening would stay with her forever. Thaddeus Blackwood, a boy she'd watched grow increasingly gaunt over the past year, stood clutching his sister as if she might disappear. His tears carved clean tracks down his dirty cheeks. "They turned off the heat," he managed to say, his voice cracking. "And Ren hasn't eaten properly in days." River felt her heart constrict as she opened the door wider. The warmth from her apartment spilled into the hallway, and she noticed how Thad instinctively leaned toward it, like a plant seeking sunlight. "Come in, sweetheart," she said softly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Let's get you both warm." Her apartment was everything their home wasn't: warm, clean, organized. Books lined the walls in floor-to-ceiling shelves, their spines creating a rainbow of colors. A kettle hummed softly on the stove, and the smell of freshly baked ginger cookies lingered in the air. She'd been about to have her evening tea when the knock came. Thad stood just inside the doorway, uncertain, still holding Ren. The little girl stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. "Dr. Thorne?" Ren mumbled sleepily, recognizing their neighbor. "Your house smells pretty." "Thank you, dear," River replied, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Would you like to lie down on my couch? It's very comfortable." Thad hesitated before walking to the plush brown couch. He laid Ren down with infinite care, adjusting the blue blanket around her. River noticed how his hands shook, how he kept glancing at the door, as if expecting someone to burst in and snatch them away. "When did you last eat, Thaddeus?" River asked, already moving toward her kitchen. "Yesterday. Maybe?" He seemed uncertain. "But Ren had an apple tonight." River pulled out bread, cheese, and ham from her refrigerator. As she made sandwiches, she observed Thad from the corner of her eye. He stood by the couch, one hand resting protectively on Ren's shoulder, his body tense as a bowstring. "Your mother hasn't been home?" she asked gently, though she knew the answer. The walls in their building were thin, and she'd heard Autumn Blackwood's screaming matches with Nash more times than she cared to count. 3 days, Thad whispered. "She left with Nash. Said they'd bring back groceries." His voice hardened slightly. "They never bring anything back except trouble." River placed a plate with sandwiches on her coffee table, along with a glass of milk. "Eat, Thaddeus. You need your strength." As if given permission, the boy practically fell onto the food, though he still took care not to wake his sister. River watched him eat with the desperate speed of someone who didn't know when their next meal would come. She'd seen it before in her years of practice, but it never got easier to witness. While Thad ate, River made a decision. She picked up her phone and stepped into her study, leaving the door open so she could keep an eye on the children. Officer Juniper Kovac answered on the second ring. "Junie, it's River. I need you to come to my apartment." "Yes, now. I have 2 children here." She kept her voice low as she explained the situation. When she returned to the living room, Thad had finished eating and was sitting on the floor beside the couch, his back against it, one hand still touching Ren's blanket. His eyes followed River's movements with a wariness that broke her heart. "I called someone who can help," she said, sitting in her armchair across from him. "Her name is Officer Kovac, and she specializes in helping children who are in difficult situations." Panic flashed across Thad's face. "Are they going to take us away? Separate us?" "Please, I can take care of Ren. I just needed help tonight because of the heat." "Breathe, Thaddeus," River interrupted gently. "No one is going to separate you and Ren. I won't let that happen. But you need more help than just tonight's warmth and food, don't you?" The boy's lower lip trembled, and fresh tears welled in his eyes. "Mom tries sometimes," he whispered, "when Nash isn't around. But then he comes back, and they both—" He trailed off, looking at his sleeping sister. "It's not your job to be the parent, Thaddeus. You're 9 years old. You should be playing, learning, being a child. Someone has to take care of Ren." The knock at the door made them both jump. River rose slowly, maintaining eye contact with Thad. "That's Officer Kovac. She's gonna help us figure this out. Okay? You're very brave for coming to me tonight. And I promise you, things are going to get better." As River opened the door to reveal Officer Kovac's kind face, she saw Thad draw himself up straighter, squaring his thin shoulders. He looked both younger and older than his 9 years, a child forced to be an adult, finally asking for help the only way he knew how. The night stretched ahead of them, full of gentle questions and difficult answers. But for now, in River Thorne's warm apartment, 2 children were safe. And sometimes, River knew from experience, that was enough of a start. Phoenix Walsh's office at Child Protective Services was drowning in the Blackwood children's case files. She'd been working for 16 hours straight, piecing together a narrative of neglect that stretched back far longer than anyone had noticed, or perhaps chosen to notice. The morning light filtered through her dusty blinds as she spread another set of school records across her desk. Thaddeus Blackwood's attendance record told its own story. Sporadic absences, late arrivals, notes about falling asleep in class. His academic performance had plummeted over the past year, yet his teachers noted his fierce intelligence when he was present and alert. Maintaining a B average despite everything, Phoenix muttered, running her finger down his grade sheet. God knows how he managed that. A knock on her door frame made her look up. Officer Juniper Kovac stood there, dark circles under her eyes matching Phoenix's own. "Got something," Juniper said, dropping a thick folder on the desk. "Medical records. Both kids haven't had checkups in over 2 years. But the ER visits." She paused, jaw tightening. "Ren was treated for malnutrition 3 months ago. The mother claimed they were having temporary financial difficulties." Phoenix opened the folder, scanning the documents. Who was the attending physician? Dr. Marcus at Portland General. He flagged it for follow-up, but Autumn never brought Ren back for the scheduled appointment. The phone on Phoenix's desk buzzed. Dr. River Thorne's voice came through the speaker. The school counselor at Riverside Elementary just sent over her notes. "You'll want to see these." 20 minutes later, they were all gathered in Phoenix's office, looking at a child's drawing that spoke volumes. The school counselor had kept it from a session with Ren 3 weeks ago. The picture showed 2 stick figures, one small, one smaller, alone in what appeared to be a dark room. No parents in sight. Classic depiction of abandonment, Dr. Thorne said softly, her psychology background evident in her analysis. The darkness around them, the way they're huddled together. Ren was trying to tell us something. Phoenix pulled up another document on her computer. "I found Curtis Blackwood," she announced. "Their father. He's in Seattle, remarried, has 2 kids with his new wife. Hasn't paid a cent of child support in 5 years. Bastard," Juniper muttered. "There's more," Phoenix continued. "Autumn's history shows a pattern. Before Nash, there were 2 other boyfriends, both with drug-related arrests. The last one, Tyler Marsh, was arrested for dealing meth out of the apartment while the kids were there." Dr. Thorne leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. "How are they doing this morning?" "Still sleeping when I left," Juniper replied. "Your spare room is probably the first proper bed they've had in months. The social worker is coming at noon to do the home inspection of their apartment." Phoenix pulled up another file on her computer. "We need to locate Autumn. Last known whereabouts." "Working on it," Juniper said. "Nash Reeves has a cousin who owns a motel on the east side. We're checking there first." The morning wore on as they built their case. Each new document added another layer to the story. Unpaid bills, eviction notices from previous apartments, complaints from neighbors about strange people coming and going at all hours. The paper trail painted a picture of 2 children who had been failed by every adult meant to protect them. At 11, Phoenix's phone rang. It was the social worker early for the home inspection. Ms. Walsh, the social worker's voice was tense. You need to see this. The apartment. It's worse than we expected. 30 minutes later, Phoenix stood in the Blackwoods apartment, the smell of neglect hitting her like a physical force. The kitchen cabinets were empty except for a few cans of expired food. The bathroom showed signs of drug use, burned spoons, needle caps hidden behind the toilet. But it was the children's room that told the most heartbreaking story. A single mattress on the floor held carefully arranged blankets, most thin and worn. A backpack in the corner contained neatly folded clothes, a few school books, and a small stash of crackers. Next to it, a teddy bear missing an eye sat protectively in front of a child's piggy bank. Thad's emergency supplies, Juniper said softly, having followed Phoenix into the room. Look at how organized it is. He was trying so hard to create some stability. Phoenix knelt by the mattress, noting how the blankets were arranged to create a barrier against the wall, probably to keep out the cold. A child's drawing was taped to the wall, Wren's work, showing what looked like penguins huddled together. The doctor's report just came in, Juniper said, checking her phone. Both kids are underweight. Wren has a vitamin D deficiency, and Thad shows signs of stress-induced insomnia. But here's the thing, no signs of physical abuse. They were neglected but not beaten. Small mercies, I suppose. Phoenix stood, her decision made. We need to find Autumn today. These kids can't come back here. She paused, looking around the room once more. Dr. Thorne has already offered to be their emergency foster placement. She's qualified. She knows them and they trust her. Let's make that happen. As they left the apartment, Phoenix caught sight of something that made her throat tight. A calendar on the kitchen wall, marked with a child's careful handwriting. Every few days, a small star was drawn, with notes like, Mom smiled today, or Mom made breakfast. Thad had been documenting his mother's good days, holding on to hope like a lifeline. Phoenix Walsh had seen many cases in her career, but something about those stars, drawn with such patient optimism, would haunt her for years to come. The day stretched ahead, full of paperwork and court filings. But one thing was clear, the Blackwood children's paper trail of neglect was about to end. The next chapter of their story was beginning, and Phoenix was determined to make it a better one. They found Autumn Blackwood and Nash Reeves at the Starlight Motel, exactly where Juniper suspected they'd be. The scene that greeted them was grimly predictable, a room thick with cigarette smoke, empty bottles scattered across stained carpet, and the sharp smell of something more sinister lingering in the air. Autumn sat on the edge of the bed, her once beautiful face hollow and aged beyond her 32 years. Her dark hair, which Wren had inherited, hung in greasy strands around her face. When Officer Kovac entered the room, Autumn barely registered her presence, her dilated pupils struggling to focus. Where are my kids? The words slurred together as she tried to stand, swaying slightly. What are you doing here? Nash lounged against the wall, his tall frame tense despite his affected casualness. At 37, he looked closer to 50, his face weathered by years of hard living. His eyes darted between the officers and the bathroom, where Phoenix Walsh suspected evidence was hastily disposed of before they opened the door. Your children are safe, Juniper said firmly, positioning herself between Nash and Autumn, which is more than I can say for their situation at home. No heat, no food, no supervision. Want to explain that, Autumn? We were coming back, Nash interjected, his voice carrying a desperate edge. Just needed to handle some business first. Kids are fine, they know how to take care of themselves. Phoenix stepped forward, her case worker badge catching the dim light. They're 9 and 6, Mr. Reeves. They shouldn't have to know how to take care of themselves. Autumn's face crumpled, a moment of clarity breaking through her drug-induced haze. Thad. He takes such good care of Wren. He's such a good boy. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, cutting trails through her smeared makeup. He's a child, Autumn, Phoenix said, softer now. Your child. And right now he's doing your job. Nash moved suddenly, reaching for Autumn's arm. We don't have to listen to this. They can't. Actually, we can. Juniper interrupted, stepping between them. Autumn, we're here to inform you that your children have been placed in emergency foster care. You'll need to appear before a family court judge to discuss their custody situation. The news seemed to hit Autumn like a physical blow. She staggered, sitting heavily on the bed. You took my babies? They took themselves, Phoenix corrected. Thad carried Wren to a neighbor's door because they were freezing and hungry. Would you like to know what we found in your apartment? Would you like to see the pictures? Nash's facade of indifference cracked. This is bullshit. Those kids are fine. Autumn's a good mother when what? Juniper challenged. When she's not with you. When she's not chasing the next high. When she actually comes home. Autumn began to rock back and forth, her thin arms wrapped around herself. I love my children, she whispered. I love them so much. Love isn't enough, Phoenix said, pulling out her card. But it can be a start. There's a bed waiting for you at Portland Recovery Center. Right now, today. You can choose your children, Autumn. You can choose to fight for them. Nash laughed, a harsh sound. Recovery Center? You think that's the answer? Autumn, baby, don't listen to them. We'll figure this out. Get the kids back. Mr. Reeves, Juniper cut in, you need to step back. This isn't your decision. The next few minutes dissolved into chaos. Nash, realizing he was losing control of the situation, began shouting. Autumn, overwhelmed and coming down from whatever she'd taken, started sobbing hysterically. It took 3 officers to restrain Nash when he tried to prevent Autumn from listening to Phoenix's explanation of the recovery program. In the end, Autumn sat in the back of Phoenix's car, staring out the window as they drove away from the Starlight Motel. Nash's angry shouts faded behind them, along with the last vestiges of the life she'd been living. They must hate me, she whispered, watching the city blur past. My babies must hate me. Phoenix glanced at her in the rearview mirror. They love you. That's what makes this so hard for them. Thad still marks your good days on the calendar. Did you know that? He puts little stars on the days when you smile, when you make breakfast, when you're really there. A sound escaped Autumn that was half sob, half laugh. Stars? He always loved stars. When he was little, before Wren, before everything went wrong. We used to lie in the park and find constellations. You can find them again, Phoenix said quietly. But first, you have to find yourself. As they pulled up to the recovery center, Autumn's hand trembled on the door handle. What if I can't do it? What if I fail them again? Then you'll get up and try again, Phoenix replied. But right now, your children are safe, warm, and cared for. They're giving you a chance to heal. The question is, will you take it? Autumn stepped out of the car, her legs unsteady but her back straightening as she looked at the building before her. Behind them, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Somewhere across the city, in Dr. Thorne's apartment, 2 children were having dinner at a real table, in a warm room with clean plates and full glasses. And here, in front of the recovery center, their mother took her first step toward finding her way back to them. Dr. River Thorne's apartment transformed over the next few days, childhood slowly seeping into its dignified spaces. Wren's drawings appeared on the refrigerator, held by alphabet magnets. Thad's carefully organized schoolbooks found a home on the lower shelf of River's massive bookcase. Small changes that spoke volumes about growing comfort and trust. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as River prepared breakfast, watching Thad help Wren button her coat. It was their 4th day of their temporary placement, and the first time Thad had allowed River to make breakfast without hovering anxiously in the kitchen. Remember to eat your lunch today? Thad reminded his sister, checking her backpack for the 3rd time. All of it. Okay? I will, Wren promised, fiddling with her newly brushed hair. River had bought her hair ties with little butterflies on them, and she hadn't stopped touching them since. She'll be fine, Thaddeus, River said gently, placing plates of scrambled eggs and toast on the table. You don't have to worry so much anymore. Thad's hands stilled on Wren's backpack. I know. It's just... He trailed off, his young face creasing with familiar worry lines. It's just that you've been taking care of her for so long, River finished. It's hard to stop. The children sat at the table, Ren immediately diving into her eggs while Thad picked at his toast. River noticed how he still watched to make sure Ren ate first, how his shoulders remained tense until his sister had cleaned her plate. "Dr. Thorne?" Ren asked, her mouth full of toast. "Can I take an extra apple for lunch? In case Thad forgets to eat his again." River's heart clenched at the role reversal, the younger sister trying to care for her caretaker. "Of course, dear. And maybe Thad can promise to eat his own lunch today." She caught the boy's eye, her gaze gentle but firm. Thad flushed, looking down at his barely touched breakfast. "I'll try." After breakfast, River walked them to school, a new routine that still felt fragile and precious. Ren skipped ahead, pointing out dogs and birds, while Thad walked closer to River, his steps measured and watchful. "Your mother's first supervised visit is scheduled for this afternoon," River said carefully, watching Thad's reaction. "After school. Phoenix will be there, and I'll be in the next room if you need me." Thad's pace slowed. Is she okay?" "She's been at the recovery center for 3 days now. Phoenix says she's doing the work, taking it seriously." "Nash, he's not allowed near the center, or near you and Ren." They walked in silence for a moment, watching Ren chase a falling leaf. Finally, Thad spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I miss her so much it hurts. The real her, from before." River resisted the urge to hug him, knowing he wasn't ready for that yet. "That's perfectly normal, Thaddeus. You can miss her and be angry at her at the same time. All your feelings are valid." At the school gates, Ren hugged River impulsively before running to join her friends. The sight of her playing freely, without constant worry, made Thad's eyes water. "She's happy," he said, sounding almost surprised. "You both deserve to be happy," River replied. "Now go on, you'll be late for class." The day passed slowly for River, filled with preparation for the supervised visit. She arranged her living room carefully, removing anything breakable, setting out water and tissues. Phoenix arrived early to brief her. "Autumn's been in withdrawal," Phoenix explained quietly. "It's been rough, but she's pushing through. She knows this visit is contingent on her staying clean." The children arrived home from school at their usual time. Ren was chattering about art class, but Thad had grown quiet again, his anxiety visible in every movement as he helped his sister with her coat. When Autumn arrived, the change in her was already visible. 3 days sober had brought some clarity back to her eyes, though her hands shook slightly as she sat on River's couch. When Ren ran to her with a cry of "Mommy," Autumn's composed facade cracked. "My baby," she whispered, holding Ren close. "My precious baby." Thad stood back, his small frame rigid. River watched as Autumn looked up at her son, tears streaming down her face. "Thad," she said softly, "my brave, wonderful boy. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." What happened next would stay with River forever. Thad took one step forward, then another, his face a battlefield of emotion. When he finally let his mother hold him, his sobs were those of a child, not the miniature adult he'd been forced to become. The visit lasted an hour. They talked, cried, shared awkward moments of silence. Autumn listened as Ren showed her the butterfly hair ties, as Thad hesitantly mentioned his science project. Small steps toward healing, witnessed by the afternoon sun streaming through River's windows. After Autumn left, escorted by Phoenix back to the recovery center, River found Thad sitting in the window seat, watching the street below. "You did very well today," she said, sitting beside him. "She looks different," he observed. "Her eyes, they're clearer." "Recovery is a journey," River explained. "There will be good days and hard days. But you and Ren are safe now, no matter what happens." From the other room, they heard Ren humming as she drew another picture for the refrigerator. The sound of normalcy, of childhood restored, filled the apartment like warm light. "Can I put a star on the calendar?" Thad asked suddenly. "For today?" River smiled, her heart full. "Of course you can, Thaddeus. Of course you can." The call came at 2:47 a.m., shattering the quiet of River's apartment. Phoenix's voice was tight with urgency. "Autumn's overdosed. She's at Portland General. Nash smuggled something into the center. River glanced toward the children's room, where Thad and Ren slept peacefully for the first time in days. How bad? They're working on her now. I'm heading to the hospital. The kids are safe with me, River finished. Keep me posted. After hanging up, River sat in her darkened living room, the city lights casting long shadows through the windows. She knew that somewhere across town, in a stark hospital room, Autumn Blackwood was fighting for her life. The same Autumn who, just hours ago, had sat on this very couch, showing tentative signs of progress. The memory of the afternoon visit now seemed fragile, like a soap bubble about to burst. Autumn had brought a small gift for each child: hair clips for Ren, a notebook for Thad. She'd been shaky but present, her eyes clear and focused as she listened to Ren's stories about school. A soft sound drew River's attention. Thad stood in the hallway, his thin frame silhouetted against the darkness. Something's wrong, he said. Not a question. I heard the phone. River patted the space beside her on the couch. Come sit, Thaddeus. He moved like an old man, each step heavy with anticipation of bad news. When he sat, River noticed how his hands clutched the hem of his pajama shirt, the same nervous gesture she'd seen Autumn make hours earlier. Your mother is in the hospital, River said gently. Nash brought drugs into the recovery center and she took them. Thad's breath hitched, but he didn't cry. Is she going to die? The doctors are helping her right now. Phoenix is there. She promised. His voice cracked. Today, she promised she was trying. She was trying, Thaddeus. Addiction it's like a monster that lies to you. It makes you break promises even when you want to keep them. They sat in silence for a moment, the distant sound of sirens floating up from the street below. Finally, Thad spoke again, his voice small. What happens if she dies? The question hung in the air like smoke. River chose her words carefully. Then you and Ren will still be safe. You'll still have a home and people who care about you. But let's not think about that yet. Your mother is fighting. She never fought before, Thad whispered. Not really. Not even when Dad left. Sometimes people have to hit rock bottom before they can start climbing up. What's rock bottom? It's when things get so bad that you finally realize you have to change. Sometimes, River paused, considering her next words. Sometimes it takes almost losing everything to understand what really matters. The night crept on. River made hot chocolate and they sat together waiting for news. Thad didn't cry, but his hand found its way into River's, holding on tight. At 4:23 a.m., Phoenix called again. She's stable. They got to her in time. Nash has been arrested. He'll face charges for smuggling drugs into the facility. When River relayed the news, Thad's grip on her hand loosened slightly. Can we see her? Tomorrow, maybe, if the doctors say it's okay. She'll need to rest. Does Ren need to know? The question, so adult in its consideration, made River's heart ache. We'll tell her that Mommy got sick and the doctors are helping her get better. She doesn't need to know all the details. Dawn was breaking when Thad finally fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from worry. River covered him with a blanket, watching his face smooth out in sleep, young again without the weight of adult concerns. Later that morning, Ren bounced into the living room, stopping short when she saw her brother asleep on the couch. Is Thad sick? She asked, her forehead creasing with worry. He had a rough night, River explained. Let's let him sleep a little longer. As she helped Ren with breakfast, River thought about cycles, how they perpetuate and how they break. Ren worrying about Thad, who worried about her, who worried about their mother, who worried about failing them all again. But maybe, just maybe, this was rock bottom. Maybe this was where the cycle would finally break. In the hospital, Autumn Blackwood opened her eyes to find Phoenix Walsh sitting beside her bed. The withdrawal symptoms were starting again, harder this time, but something was different. The image of Thad's face, so old, so worried, so like her own, stayed with her through the shakes and nausea. This time, when the doctors offered her a place in a long-term residential treatment program, she said yes before they finished speaking. Sometimes you have to lose everything to remember what matters. Sometimes rock bottom is just the beginning. The residential treatment center sat on the outskirts of Portland, a cluster of red brick buildings surrounded by towering Douglas firs. 6 weeks had passed since Autumn's overdose, and the facility had become her world, a world of group therapy sessions, one-on-one counseling, and strictly monitored visits with her children. Today's family therapy session was different. Dr. Marissa Chun, the center's lead therapist, had asked Thad to come alone, without Ren. He sat stiffly in the oversized armchair, his feet barely touching the ground, watching his mother across the room. "Thad," Dr. Chun began gently, "today we're going to talk about your father." The boy's shoulders tensed immediately. Autumn's hands, folded in her lap, began to tremble, a remnant of withdrawal that surfaced under stress. "Why?" Thad's voice was barely audible. "Because anger we don't talk about doesn't go away," Dr. Chun explained. "It just goes underground and grows roots." Phoenix Walsh sat quietly in the corner, observing. She'd spent weeks trying to locate Curtis Blackwood, and what she'd found had only fueled Thad's unspoken rage. A comfortable house in Seattle, 2 well-fed children, a lifestyle that spoke of the father he could have been, should have been, to Thad and Ren. "He has a new family," Thad said suddenly, his small fists clenching. "A better one." Autumn made a soft sound of pain. "Thad? Baby?" "Not better," he continued, his voice rising. "Just newer, clean, not broken like us." "We're not broken," Autumn whispered, though her voice wavered. "We're healing." "He left." The words exploded from Thad like they'd been waiting years to escape. "He left when Ren was just a baby. He left us with nothing. And then you started using drugs," Autumn finished, her newfound commitment to honesty evident in her willingness to name her demons. "After your father left, I started using drugs to numb the pain. And that was my choice, Thad. My terrible, selfish choice." Dr. Chun leaned forward. "Thad, it's okay to be angry at both your parents. You don't have to choose whose fault it was." The boy's breath hitched. "I hate him," he whispered. "But sometimes I hate you too, Mom. And then I hate myself for hating you." Autumn rose from her chair, crossing the room to kneel before her son. 6 weeks of proper meals and rest had brought some color back to her face, some life back to her eyes. "Listen to me, Thaddeus Michael Blackwood. You are allowed to hate what I did. You are allowed to hate that I failed you. But don't you dare hate yourself for having feelings. But Ren has you, has always had you." Autumn's voice cracked. "You kept her safe when I couldn't, when I wouldn't. But that time is over now. It's my turn to be the parent." Phoenix watched as Thad's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. His sobs, when they came, were raw and primal, the accumulated grief of years finally finding release. Autumn held him, her own tears falling into his hair, while Dr. Chun sat back, giving them space to break and begin to rebuild. Later that evening, back at River's apartment, Thad sat at the kitchen table doing homework while Ren colored beside him. River noticed how he seemed lighter somehow, as if setting down a heavy burden he'd carried for too long. "Dr. Thorne?" he asked suddenly, looking up from his math problems. "Do you think Mom will really get better this time?" River considered her answer carefully. "I think she's working harder than she ever has before. And I think having a safe place to fall makes it easier to be brave." "Like how we have a safe place with you?" "Exactly like that." Ren looked up from her coloring book. "I drew Mom today," she announced, pushing her picture forward. "See? She's smiling. And her eyes are the right color now, not all foggy like before." Thad studied his sisters drawing their mother standing tall, surrounded by flowers, her eyes clear and bright. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's how she's starting to look again." The long road to recovery stretched ahead of them all, filled with therapy sessions and supervised visits, small victories and occasional setbacks. But here in River's kitchen, watching Thad help Ren with her colors, the destination seemed less important than the journey itself. Outside, the Portland rain tapped gently against the windows, and somewhere in a treatment center surrounded by Douglas firs, Autumn Blackwood wrote in her journal about forgiveness of others, of herself, and of the long road home to her children. The Seattle rain was different from Portland's, Thad decided. Harder somehow, more insistent. He stood beside Phoenix Walsh on the wet sidewalk, staring at the two-story house with its manicured lawn and cheerful yellow door. Curtis Blackwood's house. You don't have to do this, Phoenix reminded him gently. We can turn around right now. After weeks of deliberation and countless therapy sessions, Curtis had agreed to meet his son. Not Ren. She was too young, the therapists had decided, and honestly, she barely remembered him. But Thad needed this. I want to, he said, his voice stronger than he felt. I need to see. The door opened before they reached it. Curtis Blackwood stood there, a man Thad knew only from faded photographs and fractured memories. At 41, he looked successful, comfortable, everything he hadn't been when he'd abandoned them. Thad, Curtis said, his voice catching. You've grown so much. Thad said nothing, taking in the evidence of the life his father had built without them. Through the doorway, he could see children's artwork on the walls, family photos, a kitchen that smelled of fresh-baked cookies. All the things he'd learned to live without. A woman appeared behind Curtis, Amanda, his new wife. Her smile was kind but uncertain. Would you like to come in? I made hot chocolate. No. Thad's response was quiet but firm. I didn't come for hot chocolate. Phoenix placed a supportive hand on his shoulder as Curtis stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. The three of them stood there, the rain creating a curtain around their uncomfortable reunion. I owe you an explanation, Curtis began. No, Thad interrupted, surprising himself with his clarity. You owe me the truth. Why weren't we good enough? The question hung in the rain-heavy air. Curtis seemed to age years in seconds, his comfortable facade cracking. You are. I was young and scared, and your mother was. Don't. Thad's voice sharpened. Don't blame Mom. She broke after you left. But you just started over. Like we never existed. Through the window, Thad caught a glimpse of movement, Curtis's other children, watching curiously. A boy around Ren's age, a girl maybe 3 years younger. Both well-fed, well-loved, secure in their father's presence. I see them, Thad said quietly. Your do-over kids. The ones you didn't abandon. Thad, please. My sister cries sometimes at night. She doesn't remember you, but she misses the idea of you. I used to tell her stories about how you were a secret agent or an astronaut. Anything better than the truth. Curtis tried to reach for him, but Thad stepped back, closer to Phoenix. I needed you, he continued, his voice trembling slightly. When Mom started using drugs, when I had to learn to cook for Ren, when we were cold and hungry and scared, I needed my father. But you weren't just gone, you were living this whole other life. I send money now, Curtis offered weakly. Since the court order. Money? Thad laughed, a sound too old for his young face. I didn't need money. I needed my dad. The rain intensified, but no one moved. Phoenix watched silently as Thad straightened his shoulders, looking his father directly in the eyes. I came here because I needed to see, he said. I needed to know if you were some monster who hurt us, or if you were just weak. And now I know. Curtis flinched as if struck. What do you know? That you're just a man who made choices. Bad ones. And I don't have to carry them anymore. Thad turned to Phoenix. I'm ready to go home now. As they walked away, Curtis called after them. Thad, wait, I want to make things right. Thad paused but didn't turn around. You can't make it right, he said. But that's okay. I have people who show up for me now. Real people. And Mom. She's fighting to come back to us. She's not running away. The drive back to Portland was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Somewhere past Olympia, Thad spoke again. Dr. Thorne says sometimes we have to see our ghosts to let them go. Phoenix glanced at him. And did you let him go? I think. Thad watched the raindrops race across his window. I think I'm ready to stop waiting for him to be the dad I needed. I have other people now. That evening, back in River's apartment, Ren showed Thad her latest drawing, their strange, beautiful, chosen family. River with her books and cookies. Phoenix with her kind eyes. Officer Kovac with her protective smile. Their mother, getting stronger every day in treatment. And in the center, Thad and Ren no longer alone. Do you want to add Dad? Ren asked innocently. Thad looked at the drawing, at the family they'd found rather than the one that had failed them. No, he said, pulling his sister close. It's perfect just like this. 3 months into Autumn's recovery, the rhythm of life had shifted dramatically. The morning sunlight streamed through River's kitchen window, catching the gold in Ren's hair as she carefully arranged banana slices on her oatmeal to make a smiley face. Thad sat beside her, actually eating his breakfast without watching the door or checking the time obsessively. Mom's evaluation is today, he said quietly to River, who was preparing lunches for them both. River nodded, adding an extra cookie to each lunch bag, small rewards for brave hearts. That's right. The treatment center will decide if she's ready for outpatient care. Phoenix had explained it to them last week. If Autumn passed her evaluation, she would move into a transitional living facility, with more freedom and more frequent visits with her children. The next step toward rebuilding their family. Will she live with us again? Ren asked, looking up from her oatmeal masterpiece. Not right away, sweetheart, River explained. First, she needs to prove she can take care of herself. Then we'll talk about the next steps. The changes in Autumn were remarkable. Week by week, she'd grown stronger, more present. Her face had filled out, and her hands rarely shook anymore. In therapy, she'd begun to unravel the tangled threads of her own childhood trauma, understanding how it had led her to make the choices she'd made. But more importantly, she'd begun to repair her relationship with her children, especially Thad. Their weekly therapy sessions had evolved from tearful confrontations to honest discussions about fear, trust, and forgiveness. I gave Mom my latest math test, Thad said, pushing his empty bowl away. The one with the A+. She must have been very proud, River smiled. She was. But... He paused, considering his words carefully. She was proud in a different way now. Before, when she was using, she'd get really excited and make big promises about celebrations and presents. Now she just sees me. Really sees me. The morning routine continued, backpacks checked, teeth brushed, shoes tied. As they walked to school, River noticed how Thad no longer scanned every street corner for signs of his mother or Nash. He walked lighter now, more like the child he was meant to be. Later that afternoon, Phoenix called with news from the evaluation. She passed, Phoenix announced, her voice warm with pride. With flying colors. The treatment team says she's one of their most committed patients. She's already lined up a job at a local bakery that works with recovery programs, and she's enrolled in community college courses for next semester. River shared the news with the children over dinner. Ren clapped with delight, while Thad's reaction was more measured, hopeful but cautious, like someone who's learned the hard way not to trust too quickly. When can we see her? He asked. She'll move into the transitional facility this weekend, River explained. After that, you can visit her there twice a week instead of just once. And if everything goes well, she might be able to take you out for short trips to the park or the library. With supervision? Thad checked, ever practical. At first, yes. But this is a good thing, Thaddeus. Your mother is doing the work, taking the steps she needs to take. That night, as River passed by the children's room, she heard Thad telling Ren a new version of their penguin story. Gone was the tale of baby penguins having to take care of themselves. Instead, it was a story about a penguin family getting stronger together, learning to swim through rough waters toward calmer seas. In her study, River looked over the paperwork. Phoenix had dropped off documents about long-term guardianship options, about maintaining stability while supporting family reunification. The path ahead would require careful balance, patience, and unwavering support. But watching Thad laugh at one of Ren's jokes during breakfast, seeing him actually play at recess instead of watching his sister like a hawk, noticing how he'd started keeping a journal of his own feelings instead of just tracking his mother's good days. These were the small victories that marked their progress. They were building something new here, brick by careful brick. Not a perfect family, but a real one. One that acknowledged its cracks and scars while choosing, day by day, to heal and grow stronger. As River turned off the lights that night, she heard Thad's voice from the darkness of his room. "Dr. Thorne, thank you for being our safe harbor." The words floated in the quiet apartment, a testament to how far they'd come and a promise of how far they could still go. On a bright Tuesday morning in early spring, 6 months after that desperate night when Thad carried Wren to Dr. Thorne's door, the Blackwood family gathered in River's living room for a celebration. Not a traditional one, perhaps, but significant in its own quiet way. Autumn had been clean for 180 days. She sat on River's couch, her hands steady as she held a small cake that she'd baked herself at the recovery program's bakery. Her hair was pulled back neatly, revealing clear eyes and a face that had regained its youth. A silver 6-month sobriety chip hung on a chain around her neck. "I didn't think we needed candles," she said softly, looking at her children. "We've had enough darkness." Thad sat beside her, no longer watching her every movement for signs of relapse. At 10 now, his birthday had passed last week. He seemed finally able to inhabit his age rather than shouldering the weight of adulthood. Wren perched on the arm of the couch, her butterfly hair clips catching the sunlight. Phoenix Walsh and Officer Kovac were there too, having become as much a part of this unconventional family as anyone else. They brought paperwork, always more paperwork. But today it was the good kind. Plans for supervised home visits, schedules for family therapy, guidelines for gradual reunification. "I'd like to share something," Autumn said, placing the cake on the coffee table. She pulled out a notebook, similar to the one she'd given Thad months ago. "In treatment, they encouraged us to write letters to those we've hurt. I've written many to both of you, but this one I'd like to read aloud." River watched as Thad instinctively reached for Wren's hand. A gesture of protection turned to one of support. "Dear Thaddeus and Wren," Autumn began, her voice clear and strong. "There are no words big enough to hold my regret, my shame, or my love for you both. For years, I chose darkness over your light. I forced you, Thad, to become a parent when you were meant to be a child. I robbed you, Wren, of the security every child deserves. But you never stopped loving me. Even when I was lost in the worst of my addiction, you, Thad, kept putting stars on calendars for my good days. You, Wren, kept drawing me in your pictures, always with a smile, always with hope. I cannot undo the past. I cannot give you back the childhood years that my choices stole from you. But I can promise you this. Every day, I choose recovery. Every morning, I wake up and decide again to be your mother. Not the mother who left you hungry and cold, but the mother you always deserved. You have taught me what real strength looks like. Thad, watching you carry your sister through the darkness to find help, that was strength. Wren, keeping your heart open and loving despite everything, that was strength. And now, with help from our new family," she gestured to River, Phoenix, and Juniper, "I'm learning my own kind of strength. We are not a traditional family. Our healing isn't following a traditional path. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we're exactly who we need to be, scars and all." Autumn closed her notebook, tears streaming freely down her face. Thad moved first, wrapping his arms around his mother. Wren followed, and for a moment, they held each other, their tears mixing with laughter. River caught Phoenix's eye across the room, seeing her own emotions reflected there. They had all been changed by this journey, the children finding safety, Autumn finding sobriety, and the professionals finding themselves drawn into a family story that defied conventional boundaries. Later, as they shared the cake Autumn had baked, Wren pulled out her latest drawing. It showed their entire extended family. Autumn standing tall and clear-eyed, Thad no longer carrying the weight of the world, Wren surrounded by butterfly clips and smiles. But it also showed River with her books, Phoenix with her papers, and Officer Kovac with her badge. In the background, she'd drawn their apartment building, with Dr. Thorne's window glowing like a beacon. "This is us," she announced proudly. "All of us." Thad studied the drawing, then looked around the room at their assembled family. Not bound by blood but by choice, by struggle, by healing. "Yeah," he said, reaching for another piece of cake with the casual freedom of a child who no longer had to worry about where the next meal would come from. "This is us. The spring sunlight streamed through River's windows, touching each face in the room. Outside, Portland was awakening to another day. But in here, in this moment, something precious had already awakened, the realization that family isn't always what you're born into, but sometimes what you build from the ashes of what was lost. Autumn touched her sobriety chip. Thad laughed at something Officer Kovac said, and Ren began planning her next masterpiece. They were not perfect, not completely healed, but they were together, choosing each other every day, building something new and strong and real. A different kind of family, but a family nonetheless.